My parents left me a decaying wreck of a house in rural Ohio. My younger brother James, meanwhile, inherited the Barrows family estate. 5,000 square feet of polished marble, manicured hedges, and old oil paintings worth more than my entire life insurance. I didn't protest. I didn't speak. And maybe that was my mistake. "You just take it," James said at the reading, slouching back in his chair like the entire matter bored him. "It's got history. You're the sentimental type anyway." My wife, Kate, didn't speak until we got into the car. Then she exploded. "That's it? That's all you're going to do?" she snapped, yanking the seatbelt across her chest. "He gets the estate, and you get some moldy corpse of a house no one's lived in for 40 years, and you just sit there?" I didn't answer right away. I was still reeling. The will hadn't been much of a surprise, not really, not deep down. My parents had always favored James. He was the golden boy, the charming one, the one who went to Georgetown and came back with investment firm contracts and a fiancée from old money. I was the older one, the quiet one, the high school teacher with a Honda that struggled in second gear. I didn't expect a mansion, but I hadn't expected humiliation either. "It's what they wanted," I said finally, my voice thin. Kate stared at me. It's what you let happen. That night she barely spoke. The next morning she wasn't there when I woke up. Her closet door hung open, half her clothes gone. A note on the kitchen counter, short and sharp like a slap. "Come back when you've decided to stop being a coward." That was the word that stayed with me. Coward. Not the abandonment, not the house, but that word. Because I'd heard it before, from Kate, from James, and silently from myself. By evening, I was on the road. One suitcase in the trunk. A printed map with a red circle over a town I'd never visited. Wainwright, Ohio. The lawyer gave me the keys, old brass ones, cold and unfamiliar in my palm. "House hasn't been touched in decades," he'd said. "Good luck, Mr. Barrows." The road to Wainwright narrowed into 2-lane blacktop, then gravel, then dirt. Farms fell away into thick woods. The sun dipped low, casting everything in deep amber and long shadows. I drove with the windows down, the air heavy with the scent of pine and something else. Wet earth, forgotten time. I kept thinking, what am I doing? But I didn't turn back, because the truth was, I had nowhere else to go. When I finally saw the house, I almost didn't recognize it. It crouched behind a crumbling stone wall, half swallowed by ivy and time. The roof sagged. One of the chimneys was cracked down the middle. Shutters hung like broken limbs, but it was there. A tall, narrow Victorian, 2 stories, with a widow's walk along the top like a crown now missing most of its teeth. A place once proud, now abandoned. I parked beneath an ancient oak and sat still for a moment, engine off, listening to the silence. Not the soft, gentle kind. The thick, watchful kind. Like the trees were holding their breath. Then I got out and walked to the porch. The steps groaned beneath me. The key stuck in the lock. When the door finally creaked open, it released a rush of stale air, damp wood, old paper, and a faint trace of something else. Something sour. The foyer was cloaked in shadow. Wallpaper peeled in long curls. A mirror hung crookedly above a console table, its glass fogged with grime. I stared into it, seeing only shapes. The house felt still. Not empty, still. Like it had been waiting. I dropped my bag on the floor. My phone buzzed, a message from Kate. Hope the rats are friendly. I turned it off. This was mine now, for better or worse. I didn't know yet that the worst hadn't even started. But I would find out. Soon. And what I would uncover in this house what my family had buried long ago, would change everything I thought I knew. About them, about James, and about myself. Like this story? Hit the like button and subscribe to follow what happens next. You won't want to miss it. The house groaned when the wind pushed against it. Not a creak, not a sigh, groaned, like an old animal rolling in its sleep. I spent my first night in what had once been a study. There was an old armchair that didn't collapse under me and a fireplace that grudgingly accepted a handful of kindling I found in a rusted box near the back door. No electricity, no heat, except for what the fire could give. But I didn't sleep much anyway. I lay there in the half-light, the fire casting moving shadows across the cracked ceiling, listening. I could swear I heard footsteps upstairs, not rats, not the soft scurry of paws or the scratch of claws. Number, slow, heavy steps, deliberate. But when I went up, flashlight in hand, there was nothing. Just dust and silence. The next morning, I began walking through the house with a legal pad and a pen, making notes of what needed fixing. It didn't take long for the list to get out of hand. Water damage in the kitchen, buckled floorboards in the dining room, mold in the walls. The entire west side of the roof sagged like it had taken a punch 50 years ago and never recovered. Still, I couldn't stop moving from room to room. There was something magnetic about it. A pull. Like the house was trying to tell me something. In what must have once been a library, I found floor-to-ceiling shelves half collapsed, books littering the floor like fallen leaves. Most were ruined, eaten by mildew. But tucked in the back corner was a cabinet, closed with a latch rusted shut. It took a screwdriver and 5 minutes of swearing, but I finally pried it open. Inside were papers, dozens of them, yellowed with age, written in looping cursive I couldn't read at first glance, and beneath them a stack of letters, old envelopes, sealed with wax long since cracked, dates going back to the 1880s. One caught my eye. It was addressed to Elias Barrows, Esquire, my great-great-grandfather. The handwriting was uneven, the ink smudged, but one line jumped out at me. Cannot continue falsifying the survey maps without consequence. I read it 3 times. Then I set the letter down and stared at the floor for a long minute. What the hell had my family been hiding? Later that afternoon, I climbed up to the attic. The door was jammed, but I forced it open and nearly gagged on the dust that poured out. Motes danced in the light from a single broken window. The attic was different. It wasn't just storage. It felt arranged, intentional. There were boxes, but also trunks. A rocking chair positioned to face the window, as though someone had been sitting there, watching the trees. And in the far corner, a map mounted on corkboard, brittle and yellowed, but still legible. It was the original estate layout, or at least it should have been. Except there was a second outline drawn in faded red pencil, diverging sharply from the printed property lines. Someone had redrawn the land. I stared at it, cold rising in my chest. On a whim, I dug through a nearby trunk. Old deeds, surveys, a compass, a leather-bound field journal. Inside were sketches, notations, and half a dozen references to parcels acquired from neighboring families. But the language was strange, deliberately vague. Terms like under advisement, subject to negotiation, and record altered. The farther I read, the worse it got. My ancestors hadn't just purchased the land that became the Barrows estate. They'd rewritten it through bribes, forged surveys, and threats. They stole it. This house, this ruin, was not a shameful afterthought. It was a cover-up, a place to keep what didn't fit the perfect family narrative. And now it was mine. I sat back on the attic floor, heart pounding, paper in hand. Sunlight faded behind the trees outside, and shadows began to creep across the map like ink spreading on water. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with this information, but I knew what it meant. James had inherited stolen land. The Barrows estate, every square inch of it, wasn't rightfully ours, and I was the only one who knew. I heard a creak behind me, turned sharply, but nothing was there, just the wind. Or so I told myself. I gathered the documents and brought them downstairs, spreading them across the old dining table. I took photos, then backups. I didn't trust the paper. I didn't trust the house. I barely trusted myself. That night, I didn't sleep either, and in the early hours of morning, before the light touched the windows, I made a decision. I had to confront James, not out of vengeance, out of something much worse. The need to know whether he knew, whether he'd been part of this all along, or whether, like me, he'd inherited a lie. The house didn't groan that night. It watched. The next morning, I drove into town to find cell service and made the call I'd been dreading. James picked up on the second ring. Well, the prodigal brother returns. How's the shack?" "Still standing," I said. "Barely. We need to talk." There was a pause. Then, "About what?" "Not over the phone. You should come up." He laughed. "You want me to visit your little haunted house in the woods?" "I'm serious, James. So am I." A beat, then his voice shifted, got flatter. "You found something." I didn't confirm or deny. I didn't need to. He sighed. "Fine, I'll be there tomorrow." I hung up and stared at the map on the dining table, the letters, the journal. It felt heavier than it had the night before, as if the weight of the truth grew the longer it sat in the open. I spent the rest of the day cataloging, organizing, trying to bring order to the chaos. There were names, landowners, surveyors, attorneys, all of them tied to this patch of Ohio in the late 1800s. Some of them had signed documents under duress. Some had simply vanished. One letter, unsigned, spoke of removing obstacles quietly. Each page peeled away the myth I'd grown up believing. The Barrows were not noble settlers. They were land thieves with suits and lawyers instead of masks and guns. That night it rained. Hard. Thunder shook the windows. The house seemed to lean into the storm like it wanted to disappear. I sat by the fire, reading one of the field journals by candlelight when I heard it again. Footsteps, upstairs, not heavy, not deliberate. Just moving, pausing, then starting again. I stood, heart racing. "Hello?" Silence. I grabbed the flashlight and moved slowly up the stairs. Every board creaked under me like a warning. I reached the second floor and swept the light across the hall. Nothing. Just dust and darkness. Then I noticed the far door, the guest room. Slightly open. I was sure I'd closed it earlier. I pushed it open with my foot. Empty. But the curtain was moving, not from wind, from movement. Someone, or something, had been there. I didn't sleep that night. Again. James arrived the next day in a black SUV that looked absurd, parked beneath the twisted limbs of the oak trees. He stepped out, sunglasses on, coat immaculate. "Nice place, bit of a fixer-upper." I didn't smile. "Come inside." He followed me in, boots crunching on broken tile in the foyer. His eyes swept the room like an appraiser, not a brother. In the dining room, I laid out the documents. He didn't touch them. "What is this?" he asked, brow furrowed. "You tell me," I said. "I think you already know." James picked up the letter to Elias Barrows. Read the first paragraph, then another, then another. His face didn't move, but his hand tightened on the edge of the table. He looked up. "Where did you find these?" "Attic, behind a wall of trunks." He set the letter down carefully. This is over 100 years old. And it changes everything." "No, it doesn't," he snapped. "It's old paper, that's it. You think you've uncovered some grand conspiracy? This was the 1800s, Matt. Everyone was doing this. Survey maps, land disputes, it was a mess." I stared at him. "So you did know?" "I knew there were stories, whispers, but this—" He waved at the papers. "This is nothing. It won't hold up in court. I'm not taking it to court." James narrowed his eyes. "Then what do you want?" "I want the truth to matter," he scoffed. "The truth is this house is a wreck, and the estate in Virginia is worth 7 figures. That's the truth. It's built on stolen land, James." He stepped closer. "And what do you plan to do? March into a courtroom and confess on behalf of dead men? Give it all away? To who?" I said nothing. James leaned in. "Don't be stupid, Matt. This doesn't go anywhere good. Just let it go." But I couldn't. Not anymore. James stayed one night. He didn't sleep much either. The next morning, I found him staring at the map in the attic. He turned when I stepped in. "You know this could ruin us." I nodded. "Maybe that's what needs to happen." He shook his head and left without another word. That evening, I opened the last envelope in the box. It had no address, just a name, Isaac N. Whitley. Inside was a confession. A land surveyor, Whitley had written it in 1892. He detailed how he had been paid by Elias Barrows to alter maps and destroy records. He'd taken the money, but now, he wrote, he couldn't live with what he'd done. Families had been driven out. One had their house burned in an accidental blaze. Whitley ended the letter with a single line. "If this is ever found, let it bear witness to what we did." I read that line over and over, like a prayer or a curse. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just a family shame. It was a debt. And debts must be paid. 3 days after James left, I received a letter via certified mail. No return address. Inside, a cease and desist notice. James was suing me for defamation of character and wrongful possession of private family documents. I laughed, but it caught in my throat. He wasn't bluffing. He wanted to bury it, all of it. And if I wouldn't hand it over willingly, he'd try to destroy me. That same evening, I called a friend from college, Tanya Ung, now an attorney in Columbus. She listened in silence as I explained everything. The letters, the journal, the land fraud, the lawsuit. Then she said, "You need to go public." I was hoping to avoid that. "Matt," she said gently, "you won't win in silence. James will paint you as a crackpot hoarding dusty letters in a haunted house. You need sunlight, transparency. You need the truth louder than his money." She offered to represent me pro bono. I sent her scans of everything. By morning, she had a plan. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Tanya filed an injunction to freeze any legal actions from James until ownership of the documents could be verified. Then, she sent the archive to a pair of historical experts, a land use historian and a legal archivist, who began authenticating the contents. While they worked, I sat in that crumbling house, surrounded by ghosts. I barely ate, barely slept. I read every page again, highlighted names, created timelines, and waited. Kate called once. I ignored it. The second time I picked up. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice cautious. "I heard about the lawsuit." "You mean the one your husband filed against his own brother to silence a land theft scandal?" There was a pause. "He said you were unstable, obsessed." "He would." Another pause. "You don't have to go down with this, Matt." I nearly dropped the phone. "Go down with this? You think this is a delusion?" "I think you're turning something that happened 100 years ago into a crusade." and it's going to destroy you." I swallowed hard. It already did. I'm just trying to finish it properly. She didn't reply. "I didn't ask for this, Kate. I didn't ask for the truth. But now that I know it, I can't pretend I don't." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I hope you know what you're doing." So did I. A week later, the historian's report came back. Everything was real, verified. The documents were not only authentic, they were damning. The Barrows family, between 1879 and 1891, had displaced no fewer than 5 homesteaders through falsified maps, intimidation, and coerced land transfers. 2 legal cases had been quietly settled out of court. One ended with a family leaving the state entirely. My ancestors hadn't just built an estate. They erased a small township to do it, and now I had proof. Tanya scheduled a press conference. Local papers, regional historians, even a national reporter from a heritage publication. I didn't want the attention, but I couldn't let silence win. We held it in the town hall of Wainwright. I stood behind a podium I hadn't seen since high school debate club, with a microphone that screeched when I adjusted it. And I told the story. I showed the letters, the maps. I read Whitley's confession out loud, every cracked syllable of shame and guilt. And when it was done, I said this: my family stole land. My family rewrote maps and destroyed lives to secure their legacy. I can't undo that, but I can choose not to hide it. There were no cheers, no applause, just silence. Then the sound of pens scratching, cameras clicking, and somewhere in the back someone whispered, "Damn!" The next day, it was in the papers. Ohio man exposes family's dark past. Barrows' legacy under scrutiny. Brother versus brother, the fight over stolen ground. James didn't respond publicly. He didn't have to. His lawyers sent an offer. If I signed an NDA and surrendered all original documents, he'd drop the lawsuit and give me a payout, $150,000, a 6-figure bribe to shut up. I didn't even hesitate. I refused. Tanya filed for full custodianship of the documents on behalf of the Wainwright Historical Society. We began the process of transferring ownership of the land, not to the state, but to the descendants of the families who were wronged, wherever they could be found. It wouldn't fix everything. It wouldn't bring back homes lost, names forgotten, but it was something. One night, weeks later, I stood outside the house. The wind was colder now. The leaves had turned. My breath fogged the air. I thought about James, about Kate, about the man I used to be, and I realized something. I wasn't broken, I was free. The truth didn't destroy me, it rebuilt me. The morning after my refusal to take James's money, I woke up to noise outside. 2 reporters stood by the gate, shoulder to shoulder, their breath puffing in the cold. One had a camera, the other held a notepad like a weapon. They weren't the first. In the days since the press conference, more had come. Local, regional, national. They all wanted the same thing, a soundbite, a symbol, a fall from grace family saga that could fill a 2-page spread beside a glossy ad for winter coats. I didn't speak to them. I didn't want to be a symbol. I wanted to be a man who told the truth. But it didn't matter anymore. My name was out. So was James's, and so was the estate. Barrows was no longer a quiet sign on a wrought iron gate in Virginia. It was a scandal. And scandal eats everything in its path. The first article to go viral wasn't about me. It was about the land. A breakdown of stolen plots, old maps, and hidden settlements, illustrated with satellite images and annotated diagrams. It accused the Barrows family not just of fraud, but of cultural erasure, generational theft. Then came the think pieces. Inheritance, power, and the quiet men who keep secrets. When Land Remembers, How the Past Shapes the Present. A native historian wrote an op-ed connecting our family's land grab to broader patterns of colonial dispossession. He didn't name me, but he didn't have to. James issued a public statement 2 days later through a law firm in D.C. While we regret the confusion caused by our ancestors' records, we stand by the legal inheritance process and are confident in the integrity of our family's holdings. Confusion. Integrity. He still thought this could be contained. It couldn't, because people had started showing up. Descendants. Not all of them had proof, but some did. A woman named Teresa Green came with a hand-drawn family tree and a journal entry dated 1890. They burned the barn today. Mama says we'll move west. I buried the horseshoes where Papa said the boundary was, by the big rock near the ash tree. Said they can't take our land if we leave a part of us in it. She'd found the rock 2 years ago, thought it was just a story. Now she knew. Others followed. Old names, once wiped from records, reappeared like ghosts refusing to stay dead. I invited them in. We walked the house. I showed them what I found. I didn't offer apologies. I knew that wasn't enough. But I listened. I listened to stories about forced moves and lost photos, about family heirlooms pawned for train tickets, about the silence that followed shame, passed down through generations. The house, once mine alone, became something else, a meeting place, a reckoning ground. That week, I made another decision. I drafted a letter to the Virginia State Registry of Land Titles, requesting a voluntary freeze on the Barrows estate holdings pending historical investigation. Tanya said it was risky. James would see it as war. But I didn't care anymore. If justice meant fire, I was ready to burn. 3 days later, I received an email from a university ethics board. They wanted to collaborate, fund an archival project, set up a rotating exhibition of the documents, invite descendants to speak. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. This wasn't just about shame, it was about memory. Then, late one night, my phone rang. Private number. I answered. "You think you've won?" James's voice, flat and unfamiliar. "No," I said, "but I think I've started." He was silent. I imagined him pacing in his townhouse office, tie loosened, scotch untouched. "You've ruined everything. You've poisoned the name." "I didn't poison it, James. I just opened the bottle." "You don't know what you've done." "Yes," I said, "I do." And I hung up. The following morning, Tanya called. "James is selling," she said. "He's liquidating assets, fast. Running? Or protecting what he can. Either way, he's pulling out." That night, I sat at the dining table surrounded by letters, photographs, voices of people long gone. I lit a candle and opened Whitley's confession again. Let it bear witness. It had. And now, so would I. Not as a headline, not as a brother in a feud, but as a man who chose truth over comfort, and didn't look away. The wind changed that morning. It carried no frost, no threat, just air, clean, ordinary. I stepped out onto the porch with a mug of black coffee and looked at the house. It still sagged in places. Paint peeled in long curls. But the roof didn't leak anymore. The windows held. And inside, something had shifted. Not just the foundation, but the silence. It wasn't hollow anymore. It was full. Not of ghosts, but of purpose. The Wainwright Historical Committee had approved the plans. The Barrows homestead would be converted into a joint heritage site and research center. Not a museum, but something alive, something shared. One wing would house the original letters, maps, and journals under archival conditions. Another would be open to descendants for community use. Gatherings, storytelling nights, workshops on local history and land rights. The attic would remain untouched, exactly as I found it. a reminder. Restoration volunteers came from all over. Descendants, local students, retired carpenters. Some brought tools, some brought food. One brought a harmonica and played in the evenings, seated on the porch rail. And every day the house grew stronger, just like me. I worked until my hands ached, painting, hammering, cataloging, guiding. Sometimes I stopped to breathe, to remember the first night I walked through the door, alone, humiliated, ashamed. And I smiled, because I wasn't that man anymore. Kate never came back. Her final message was short. "You made your choice." She was right. I had. James disappeared from the press, from the estate, from my life. Last I heard, he moved to South Carolina. Quiet, no interviews. His name had become a cautionary tale in land ethics seminars. I didn't hate him. I pitied him. Because in trying to protect a legacy of power, he missed the chance to build a legacy of truth. One afternoon in late October, I stood before the restored fireplace as a small group gathered. Journalists, academics, locals, elders. We lit a ceremonial candle and placed it on the mantel. I gave no speech. I simply said, "Let this house speak for those who never had the chance." Then we walked the halls together, room by room, letter by letter, truth by truth. That night, I sat alone in the attic. I opened the last remaining envelope I'd found weeks ago but never dared to read. It was a letter, addressed to no one, dated 1893. If you're reading this, it means the lies didn't last. Good. Maybe now someone will know the price of silence. Maybe now they'll remember the land was never ours to begin with. No signature, just a postscript. Plant something honest in this soil. Let it grow. The next morning, I did just that. In the field behind the house, I dug into the dark earth. My hands raw, my knees soaked, and I planted an oak sapling. Small, unsteady, but alive. It would take years to grow, decades, maybe longer than me. But it was a start, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was rebuilding the past. I was building the future. Here, in the house my parents left me, the one I never wanted, the one that gave me everything.